Today we're at the Toronto Rock Athletic Center. It's just a beautiful facility. So, listeners, you might hear some balls bouncing off the boards because their guys are working on their sticks right now, but that's all part of the ambience. But we're really pleased to have with us today one of the greats of our game at both the NLL and international level, Jim Scoop Veltman.
Well, officially it's James Edward Veltman, but I grew up as Jimmy as a kid and turned into Jim as I got older. But I was born in Brampton, Ontario, March 8 of 1966, so I'm 58 years old.
How did you get interested in this game?
Well, in Brampton, my dad was a Dutch immigrant, so he loved soccer. So we always had to try soccer first, and I did that too. But it was in Brampton, if you were a Brampton kid, in the summers you played lacrosse, in the winters you played hockey. That was just a typical, Brampton was small back then, like a town. And that's what typical kids did. So I was your typical Brampton kid that loved sports at an early age. And I remember my dad, signing me up to Brampton minor lacrosse, house league, 5 years old. My older brothers played. Not long, but they did play, and so I think it was my turn, kind of thing. So I played when I was 5 years old, house league for Brampton Plumbing. It was called. That was my team name.
Where did you get your first stick? Who gave you your first stick?
You know what? I think my dad would have, probably hand me down from my older brothers. That was a typical thing that happened in our household. I had two older brothers that would hand me down all their sports equipment. And my mom she grew up a seamstress in Holland. She had those skills. So she would cut the equipment, she would re-sew it back together. My kidney pads actually were made by her. They weren't actually bought kidney pads. She made it out of foam, and she sewed the material together with the suspenders on it and some ties in the front. And those are my kidney pads. They didn't always work. It wasn't the hard plastic, it was the soft, but that's the way I grew up.
You would have used wood to start at that stage, right?
Yeah, no, they were definitely wood sticks. The whole pocket piece was leather. It was only, after a few years where it became some more nylon, I think it's called. It's kind of 4 leather runners with nylon strips through it. But I was a wood stick player for many years. Actually, my first plastic, they called it back then, my first plastic field lacrosse stick was in junior.
In junior? Okay,
yeah.
So you went a number of years.
That's right.
Like 10 years or so before you got plastic. And, so you were born in Brampton and grew up in Brampton, and you had a lot of experience playing first in Brampton, I guess, at the different levels. And so you played your minor lacrosse there, and then you played 5 years of junior A lacrosse for Brampton. What was that like,
I remember my first rep team. It was the Brampton Excelsiors. When I was 6 years old, I guess they felt I was good enough to make the rep team, and I played with kids that were 2 years older than myself. I was the little guy on the team, and I remember the coach, I couldn't see over the board, so he would always pick me up and put me beside him and put me on when the game didn't mean much. I think I might have scored 1 goal all year long. It might have been an empty net goal, for all I know. But that was my first experience that I remember of playing lacrosse in Brampton. Living very close to the arena, Memorial Arena, I was played a lot in the outdoor, we called it the outdoor bowl. I know they call them boxes now, but it was an outdoor arena outside Memorial Arena that the neighborhood kids would meet. And I was friends with the Haynes family, which is a famous lacrosse family in Brampton. And they had kids that were very similar in age to me, one older, one younger. So there was always someone to play with. And we would call each other and bike over to each other's houses and meet at the bowl and practice our craft there. And my mom would make sure our sticks were in good shape. She would put in the shooting strings for me, and she would put in the soup can or whatever it took to get that pocket to be nice and supple and soft enough. And she'd put Vaseline in it, and she made sure my sticks were good enough to play.
Yeah, so it sounds like your mom was pretty well your equipment manager.
She was, yeah. Well, we had 5 kids in my family, so she was equipment manager, household, person, my dad was busy working a lot of the hours, and back then you would carpool, and just any way to get the kids maybe out of the house is what my mom felt. But she always believed in activity for kids, and our family was no different. And living close to Memorial Arena helped, and we had a park not too far from us as well.
So the bowl became the center of your universe kind of growing up. You could get in there any time of day kind of thing? Was that?
Yeah, it was open
access?
to the public. You couldn't get into the arena itself, but you could get into the bowl. No problem, it was open.
So a great place to hone your
It was a great place to hone your craft for free.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say the boards always, there was some vandalism there, and sometimes the boards had holes in them. And I remember the surface was more of an asphalt, kind of a prickly asphalt, so you didn't want to fall. I think we held some practices in there, but most of the indoor stuff was in Memorial Arena, and the outdoor stuff that the kids would just kind of fool around and meet and play together. And we even had kids from Huttonville that came and were carted in by their parents, like Troy Cordingley. He would spend time in my house or at the Haynes house, and his mom, they lived in Huttonville, which is, I guess, a country suburb of Brampton, and he would come in for the day, and we'd just play together, and hopefully more kids showed up, and hopefully a goalie with maybe a bit of equipment. That was always exciting as well.
So you went through junior A with the Brampton Excelsiors, and when you left there, did you go right to the senior team there?
Yeah, I did. I played 5 years of junior in Brampton. And I wasn't one of these late season trades. Actually, Peterborough had asked to trade for me, and my general manager at the time asked if I wanted to go, and I just didn't feel right about winning something with a team that I wasn't really a part of all the years. And I was in Brampton for 5 years, and I felt very loyal to them, and so I ended up not going for a Minto Cup. I believe they won it that year too, and I didn't go, but it's one of the hardest trophies to win, so I kind of regret that decision now, because I know it's quite common practice now to do that, but I didn't at that time. And then after that, I went into they called Senior A back then. It wasn't called Major, but I joined Senior A in Coquitlam, actually. I got a phone call when I was at school in Thunder Bay. I did my undergrad in physical education in Lakehead University, and Troy Cordingley and myself were there together, and we got a call from the president of Coquitlam Adanax Lacrosse, Dr. Don Hedges, and he convinced the two of us to go out. Troy's a year younger than me, so he would play his last year of junior for Coquitlam Adanax, and I played my first year of Senior A ball there.
Oh, you did? Okay, so what year would that be roughly?
That would be 1988.
1988. So you got to experience playing on the West Coast, which everybody usually has great memories of playing out there.
Yeah, I never knew that as a kid, that you could actually use lacrosse to travel and see Canada or see parts of the world. And I always thought, well, lacrosse, I'm a Brampton boy, so I'm Brampton forever. But it really opened my eyes, and I got a chance to see a part of Canada that I never knew. And Coquitlam treated its players really well. I grew to love them. I played actually three summers there.
And you played with the Shamrocks as well at some point?
I did, yeah. My last year of Senior A lacrosse in 2003 was with Victoria Shamrocks, and that was a conversation I had with John Tavares at the World Championships in 2003. I played for Team Canada, and so did he. And just jokingly, I think at the end of, we had won it, a gold medal game, and he says, "Hey, what are you going to do this summer?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to play in Brampton." And he says, "Why don't you play in Victoria?" And I said, "Nah, I don't know. I don't know if I'd do that." He says, "No, why don't you play?" I said, "Well, I got a family. I got a couple kids and a wife." He says, "Listen, they will take care of you. They will provide a vehicle, apartment, some money if you go out there to play." And I said, "Yeah, I don't know, maybe." And I threw out this number, and I said, "It would probably take this to get me to go." And he said, "Okay." And sure enough, about a week later, I got a call from the Victoria GM, and, "Hey, I hear you're interested, and we're going to put together as good a squad as we can this year." And I liked the team that I saw, and I ended up out there.
And your whole family went?
And my whole family went, yeah.
Wow.
They rented a minivan for us while we were there, which we needed at the time.
Yeah.
My kids were, at that time, were 2 years old and 4 years old.
Wow. Did you win a Mann Cup when you were out there?
We did. We won. 2003 was a special year for me, because I ended up winning the NLL championship, which was And then I won the World Championship with Team Canada that summer.
Wow.
As well as we won the Mann Cups, so I had the trifecta that summer.
The Triple Crown.
That year, yeah, that year was a special year for me.
Wow, wow. And where did you win your other Mann Cups? You had 3 others that year.
Yeah, I won in 92, 93, I won Mann Cups with Brampton, and in 98 with Brampton. Those were very special for me. 1992 is probably the most special Mann Cup. I'm actually wearing the ring of that one right now, and this is the Mann Cup ring that we won in 1992. We had, some would say, as an all-star team. Back then, we played a lot of offense-defense, so you played on a line of 5 guys, and probably the best line I ever played with. I had Troy Cordingley on my line and John Tavares, my brother, John Veltman, and also Pat Coyle. The 5 of us formed a pretty formidable line in both ends. John Veltman and Pat Coyle provided the defense, and Tavares could play defense too. Cordingley, not so much, but I could play both ends as well. So we had a pretty good line, and yeah, we won a Mann Cup together, so it was kind of fun.
And what else after that?
So in 1993 was the same team,
Yeah.
but this time, the first one we won in Brampton Memorial Arena, which was a big deal to me. It's where I grew up playing.
Yeah.
So that was really special and fun in front of family and friends, and just a packed house. And New Westminster came with a pretty good team. We ended up beating them 4-2. And then the next year we went out to Coquitlam and beat them 4-1. And then in 1998, Coquitlam came to us, and we played in the Powerade Center in Brampton, that one. So it wasn't Memorial, so it wasn't as special, but it was still special in the sense I don't think we were favored to win that Mann Cup, and yet we won with a real, we won with a real team concept, and I always enjoy winning championships like that. We didn't have a lot of superstars, where in 1992 and 93 we had some superstar players with Cordingley and Tavares, and we had both Kilgore brothers at that time. We had some really good players in 92 and 93.
Who was your goalie back then?
I was Bill Geary.
Okay,
Bill Geary was our main goalie, and Tippy was the other one. I can't even remember his last name right now, but he was our spare goalie for that.
Wow. When did you know you wanted to play pro lacrosse or try pro lacrosse out?
Oh yeah, I didn't really. It wasn't something that we aspired to do because I guess it wasn't anywhere near us. I think the nearest team was when the MILL was in Baltimore. I think they were in Philadelphia, New England, and one other team that escapes me. And then I think in 91 or 90, Detroit Turbos had a team.
Yes.
But that still was, a 4-hour drive plus a border crossing, so you're talking 5 hours one way. Not ideal. I was working in Bowmanville at the time, so that would have been a long commute. And then all of a sudden Buffalo got a team. And a friend of mine, John Meridian, was the GM for that. And he gave me a call. I was 26 years old, and he said, "Hey, would you be interested in trying out for the Bandits? We're starting a new team, and we'd like you to try out."
That was, what year?
That was 1992.
Okay.
Yeah, so 91 would have been the tryout time.
Yeah.
92, it started in January of 92. But that was very intriguing to me because, again, Buffalo's a little bit closer again. I know it's a border crossing as well, but that was a lot of fun because they only played 8 games back then. So it wasn't a huge commitment. I was just starting my teaching career, which I wanted to really focus on. And I had just, recently met this woman that I ended up marrying in 1993. So I had a lot of other, interests that were going for me at the time. So I was just kind of trying out this lacrosse thing, but I just fell in love with it.
Yeah, because you went on for a 16-year career.
I did.
At pro lacrosse.
Yeah. I was interrupted by a year of, we volunteered in Africa for a year.
Oh.
So I was interrupted for the 1997 year. I did not play pro lacrosse that year because we were in Uganda, Africa at that time.
Wow. You've done a few things like that. Like you're up in the far north with indigenous communities, right?
Yeah.
Talk about that experience as well. Yeah.
Sure. That was this summer after I retired from the Toronto Rock, 2008. I retired, and actually the Toronto Rock was very, the ownership group was very supportive of, some of the things that my family wanted to do. My kids were, I would say, well, that was 2008, so 9 and 7 at the time, so very young. we want to kind of introduce them to volunteer work and charity work, which is pretty important to me and my family, and just how you raise your kids and giving back, that kind of thing. And it was one thing to retire, but it felt good, obviously, the accolades and things like that. But I was kind of thinking, how can I give back? I mean, as soon as possible, while my name's a bit relevant, because you become irrelevant very quickly. So I thought it was time. And what we did was, actually, in my very last game, we asked if volunteers would pass around a hat and receive donations from fans, which raised, I think it was around $6,000 doing that on that game. And then the Toronto Rock ownership being what it is, they matched it. So we had enough money to send me and my family to fly up to Attawapiskat.
Where is that located?
That's on the edge of James Bay. It's a fly-in community. You can only fly in from there. The road ends around Timmins, Cochrane area. Yeah. So we drove to that area, and then we flew the rest of the way. But it needed a lot of coordination. We wanted to bring a lot of donated lacrosse equipment, so I got on the phone and asked as many lacrosse players, hey, whatever you have in your garage, I want to get it to Attawapiskat. So they actually started a program up there through a woman who was teaching up there. I believe her name's Karen Priest, and she was teaching and coaching in the high school up there, and got lacrosse started. But we obviously gave them the equipment and some of the sticks that they needed. We got sticks donated by Brian and STX, and they really helped us out as well, and brought equipment up there. Actually, it was Dan Dawson's dad, may he rest in peace. He actually helped us bring lacrosse equipment up there through the helicopter that provides police service up there. Because the police service, the way they do their shifts is by helicopter.
Yes.
They fly in and do their shifts. And he said, listen, he says, if I can get the equipment to Timmins, and they fly out of Timmins to Attawapiskat in this helicopter that could, fit this donated lacrosse equipment, because we had about 9 duffel bags full of lacrosse equipment ready to go. So he ended up driving from Oakville in a van. He rented a van to drive to Timmins to drop this lacrosse equipment and make sure it got there. That's how dedicated people around me were to doing some kind of lacrosse up in that area.
So about how many youth were you instructing when you got up there?
Well, not a lot. Actually, to be honest, I don't think it was well advertised in the community. We had a contact there who we thought was doing the advertising prior to going, but not a lot of advertising happened. So we ended up printing flyers as quickly as possible when we got there and started handing them out. Any kids we met on the street, we said, hey, you might want to come out to the arena, and we're holding lacrosse camp. So I think we started with 3 on the first day, and by the last day we had about 57. So
that's not bad.
Of youth, of youth coming through from all age groups, from the young ones in elementary school to those high school kids that came, and they were pretty good, actually. But just for my kids to see that as well, as what it means and what the game can do, and how it can bring communities together and different cultures together, was pretty special for us.
Do you know if they're still playing a little bit up there? Or
I believe they are.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
wonderful.
I believe they are.
That's amazing. So let's talk about a little bit about the Toronto Rock. And you had a lot of people that really enjoyed watching you play, and I remember from the time that we were together for a few years there with the Rock at the Gardens. It was quite something, the Gardens and the way that worked out. Yeah. It's like a perfect storm where you had Les Bartley, who I know you think tremendously of, and we all do, and Les was, and Johnny Moradian played a big role. And talk about Les for a little while, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Well, my introduction to Les was in Buffalo first. I played 5 years in Buffalo, and we won 3 championships together. His story is really interesting because he was a childhood friend of John Meridian. Yeah. He wasn't a household name in the lacrosse world. I had never heard of him before. I think, he reached kind of senior B, maybe a few games senior A level. But he was just a friend that kind of, did the odd jobs or things that nobody else wanted to do. And he was an assistant coach with us when I first started in Buffalo. Buff McCready was our head coach. After we lost our first 3 games in Buffalo to start our first inaugural season, John Meridian wanted to make a change, and Buff McCready was removed, and actually Les Bartley was put in. And I was kind of, at the time as a player, you're kind of like, okay, what's going on here? Did I really make the right move of, because it's a big commitment to come from Bowmanville to Buffalo, and, I'm trying to start my teaching career, and who's this Les Bartley guy? And, it just seems kind of a guy you brought off the street. But it didn't take long for me to really just fall in love with this guy. He's a real people person first, really good communicator. Actually worked with the union GM plant. He was a union representative, so obviously he had those good communication skills from that. But some of the things they wanted to implement in the game was almost like field style in the box. But the one thing I loved about Les is he was always willing to try stuff, but he wasn't willing to just drive it into you until you did it. He was more like, let's try this, and if it doesn't work, let's try some other ideas you might have. And the thing I loved about Les is he welcomed input. He didn't always use your input, which is fair. He's the head coach. His decisions are final. But he welcomed them. And that's what I enjoyed as a player, is being able to just say, hey, what about this? And because as a professional, you're thinking of the game in all kinds of ways and different creative ways. You come from different teams. So I really appreciated that about him. And so I played with him for 5 years in Buffalo. And then I went away in Africa for a year. Hadn't heard about lacrosse for that year because obviously there was no internet, there wasn't cell phones back then. And I got a fax that, through a fax machine of the village we were in, there was one post office. And people knew us as the white people in the village, so whenever a fax came through with our names, somebody would come to our house, knock on the door, hey, you gotta go to the post office, there's a fax that came in for you, so go to the fax machine and wait for that fax to come through. And Les Bartley says, listen, they're starting a new team in Hamilton called the Ontario Raiders in the NLL, and we want you to be part of that team. We want to, pick you in the expansion draft. But then about a week later, I got a fax from Buffalo Bandit GM. At the time, it was Marty Cooper, and he says, hey, listen, we can't wait for you to come back. And, you're part of our team, you're our property and stuff like that. So I was a little conflicted, and I was so far away. It wasn't like I was going to get involved, or I couldn't pick up the phone and say, hey, what's going on? So I just left it. And then I actually got in contact with the Players Union at the time and said, hey, listen, this is what's happening. I'm not sure what I'm allowed to do, or who has my rights, or am I a free agent? I don't know. And in the end, they said I could go to whichever team I wanted to go. And no offense to the Bandits fans, they were the best ever. I just needed something closer to my home.
Right.
And we were coming home from, you got to understand, real impoverished country, and we had a lot of those, issues of coming from a poor place to an extravagant place like Canada. So we were going through a lot of mental, I don't know what you would call it, just challenges for ourselves to kind of integrate back into Canadian society. So moving to a team that was a little closer to us, because we had started in the beaches. We lived in the basement of my wife's sister's home, just to get started again, coming back from Africa. So it just made sense to go to Hamilton instead of Buffalo,
Sure.
with Les as a coach again. And Les said he was moving, so I really liked Les as a coach, so I moved with him to Hamilton. And then, as you know, it only lasted a year there, and it moved to Toronto, Maple Leaf Gardens. And I still remember that first game. I was living in the beaches. I came to the game by TTC because I didn't have a car, with my gear, and walked up to the arena, and you saw a lineup outside, and you kind of, what's this all about? And all of a sudden, that first game was delayed by, I don't know, half hour, because they didn't have enough ticket windows open. And we're like, okay, well, some kind of buzz is going on outside. And then to get there, and I think the first game was in front of around 7,500.
Yes.
And then after that, it was like 11,000, and then it just grew after that exponentially. And you're kind of like, what's going on here? Like, we never played in front of more, than 2,000 or 3,000 in our local arenas. So, and this is Toronto. We played in front of 16,000 in Buffalo, but this is Canada, what's going on? And so it was just such an amazing feeling, and to have Les as the coach leading the way, and him bringing in players that really adopted the team concept. We didn't have superstars. Like, I know we had Colin Doyle, he was probably our biggest superstar at the time, but he wasn't winning the scoring race. Like, he might have placed 5th or 6th in the scoring race. And then after that, it would drop on our team anyways in terms of points. So we didn't really have superstars, but we had people that just bought in and understood their role. And whether you were a defensive guy or an offensive guy or a two-way guy or a goalie, or it just felt special. And that's what Les did. Like, Les did that. And the rest of us bought in and just offered our input. And like I said, he would welcome it, but then make final decisions. And it just became something really special to win 5 championships in 7 years. It was just unreal to be part of. It was. I thought it couldn't get any better coming from Buffalo. Like 3 championships in 5 years was pretty special. But it just got harder and harder to win as more teams came in, as more players from Southern Ontario joined the league. But Les made it happen.
And that was really a perfect storm at that time.
Yeah.
You had Maple Leaf Gardens was only going to be open 2 years.
Yeah.
So people wanted to get into the Gardens, and many of them had never sat in a gold seat in their life,
Right.
and they were able to, for like $30,
Yeah.
sit in a gold seat
Yeah.
to see a major sporting event. And then there was pro hockey influence in terms of some of the ownership and that
Yeah.
kind of thing, and they committed to buying television. And the main thing was Les and you guys were winning.
Yeah.
And so the product was always a winner on television, and that helped build the crowds. But
Yeah.
I hear they used to play hockey in this place. Yeah, I heard that too.
Hockey's not a bad game.
Yeah, it's not bad.
It's a little slow.
Toronto Rock Lacrosse is here. Get your tickets now and get ready to rock.
I can remember, Jim, we would send out like 15 or 20 ticket salespeople, all with $20 ticket batches, because that was the only way we could handle the transaction
Right.
out in the street, because it wrapped around to Yonge Street,
Yeah.
up Yonge Street, the lines.
Yeah.
And the Gardens, they only had like 2 or 3 windows because they were always sold out in advance for
Right.
Leaf
Right.
games. So
I heard beer sales weren't too bad either.
I think they did all right. That Molson's was one of the sponsors and was probably pretty happy about that. And it was kind of a neat time because they had the hot stove lounge was accessible to the players afterwards, and it was kind of a neat time for the sport and the game. Now Les and Johnny were responsible for the offense-defense method of play that everybody plays now, but it was new back then as well.
Yeah.
And so maybe tell us about how did that come about? Did you like it? You don't have to say you liked it if you didn't, because I talked to real old timers and they really liked it better when they could play both, and they could take, if you were hit on one end, you could give the hit on the other end, and it kind of policed itself, the game. So I'll throw that out to you, Jim.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and going back a bit further, like my first experience with it was actually Les Wakeling. He was our head coach in Brampton during those Mann Cup years in '92, '93. And we had certain players that just, didn't offer much in the offensive end. And he actually only changed like 2 or 3 guys. That was it. Like a Brian Shanahan, for example. Great defensive player, not as good in the offensive end. So Brian would come off and, an offensive guy would join the offense. So, but it was part-time, where Les and Johnny took it to a whole other level where it was almost like a full-time thing. And personally, I like to see players that can play all over the floor. I might have shook off Les every now and then. It's my turn to come off. I'm not coming off. That kind of thing. So, but I would say I like the two-way play better myself. But I can see the skill level of the offensive guys and defensive guys actually has risen since I played for that reason, because you can focus on one part of the game. The way they play defense now and stripping the ball and angles and things like that wasn't really what we learned. And some of the offensive, skills that these guys bring, rebounds off the goalie that they still dive and put in the net, and like they didn't exist much when I was playing. So I think that's what I enjoy about it, is that the actual skill level has risen. But as far as being a player that can play all over the floor, I kind of miss that.
Yeah. Did you play field lacrosse here and there as well?
A little bit. I was asked to play actually in 1998 field lacrosse championships in Baltimore with Team Canada, but I didn't have much exposure to it, and I admitted that. Frank Nielsen was a head coach, and he knew me from my box lacrosse days with him as a head coach in Coquitlam. So he knew I could do it. I think he wanted me for the midfield and picking up ground balls more than anything. I didn't enjoy the sport. It's just a little bit too slow paced for my liking. I like the confined space of a box, having to make decisions of angles and glass and ball spins and things like that, where field is probably more of a pure sport in that sense. Maybe closer to the more traditional indigenous roots that lacrosse comes from than the box lacrosse. But I find the box lacrosse more physical, and like I said, it just takes a little bit more quicker decisions that I enjoy.
So you mentioned Frank might have wanted you for your scooping, and that
so.
leads us to where nicknames were given to all the rock players, because we were really building that common man theme up with the audience, which loved it, because you had firemen, you had teachers, you had policemen that were playing really for the love of the game and not a big paycheck. But it was kind of a neat way to do it. And we had some great nicknames, that came up, like Whipper Watson and Popeye Doyle, and you became Scoop Veltman, and obviously because you owned ground balls, and you were given an award by the NLL for ground balls. Talk about that whole thing.
No, that nickname thing was something also for the audience, I guess, when you introduce the players, before the game starts. So it was kind of neat that you said the first name, and then, Kimbo Squire, and Glenn Professor Clark kind of thing. So that was kind of cool, I think. Actually, my nickname in Buffalo is Hoover, after the vacuum cleaner. So I thought that was pretty unique. But in Toronto, it became Scoop, and some guys tease me that it's more for ice cream than it is for ground balls, but that's okay. But yeah, it's just something that I became good at. Again, understanding the bounces I was always intrigued by that. To me, possession is everything in this game. It's not like hockey where possession is, exchanged very quickly and often. Losing the puck is easier than the ball in lacrosse because it's sitting in a pocket and you kind of play defense, you play offense kind of thing. And I just gravitated towards that, and it's just something that I enjoyed doing and tried to get better and better at. And then they started tracking them and the number that you got. And there was a game in Calgary, I can't remember what year it was, and they said that I scooped the most ground balls of anybody in the history of the MILL and NLL. So that was kind of a neat moment.
Single game or for the season?
It was for the career.
Oh, for the career.
It was a career loose balls. Wow. And then they awarded me with the game ball and the game sheet afterwards. The Rock put a little display together for me, which was something I can forever keep. Brody Merrill has since broken that record, so congratulations to him. But at that time, I owned it, and that was pretty special to me because, again, I just think that's a big part of the game that I think influences the results.
Well, I think you got the angles down for where the balls were going, but I remember one story you told me about angles, and you'd be going after a ground ball against the boards, and you'd look in the glass to see if you were clear or not. Expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, it was one practice where, like typically before a game or practice, I would just kind of run around the outside of the boards and bang the ball off it, try the glass, try the boards, just to feel how much bounce is coming back and the floor itself. And then there was one practice where, the coach would throw in a loose ball and two guys have to go after it and, outlet it to the next guy in line, just so that you could show that you could escape from a ground ball after getting it. And then I realized that, the glass, I could see my reflection. And then it came to me that, well, what if I use a reflection not just to see myself, but to actually see where I need to go with next, like where my teammates are. So I could always get to the ground ball, first, or if I wasn't first, hit the stick and get it, if I was second. But then it's always, what do I do with it? I'm not a big guy. I'm only, 180 pounds in this league, and I'm easily moved and easily bumped. So I was always trying to think, what is a good way to get rid of it quickly? And I soon discovered that actually I can see my teammates where they are in the glass. So once I have it, I know which way to turn, either right or left, or to let the ball pass by both of us, and realizing that one of my teammates will be next.
Like
to get
eyes
it.
in the back of your head, basically.
Well, people, said I had eyes in the back of my head, but I actually was cheating. I was looking through the glass. Yeah.
It's using what's around you.
Yeah. But maybe I didn't admit that right away. I liked it that people said I had eyes in the back of my head.
Well, for things like that, you became a fan favorite, but I've never seen an object that one fan gave to you. And I think it's right nearby. And I wonder if you could grab that and explain it and tell the story behind this. So, like, when did you get it? And, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, as players, I mean, obviously fans mean a lot to us. And this one particular fan in the crowd, a lot of teammates were coming up to me and saying, "Hey, do you know this woman, the goddess of lacrosse?" And I said, "No, not really." And they said, "No, like, she wears your jersey in the stands, and she'd really like to meet you sometime." So as Rock players, we would go out actually with the fans to the local bar or whatever, the sponsorship bar, afterwards, after games and stuff. And I got a chance to meet this woman, Christine Kurt, who was nicknamed the goddess of lacrosse.
Was she from Toronto?
And she was from Toronto area. Yeah. She would go to the games with her husband at the time. He's since passed, but and she said she fell in love with the sport. And she actually tells a story that she actually fell in love with the way I played the sport, which is unusual because most people's favorite player was either the goalie or, Whipper Watson or Colin Doyle or one of those players. But so it was interesting that someone felt that my style of play was her favorite. And she, at the end of my career, she hosted this retirement party for myself. And what she did was her sister is an artist, and she bought this traditional wood stick. Normally it would have like the leather pieces right here and the cat gut down the side, but she turned it into a memory for me. And what she got her sister to do was to draw and then paint all the teams that I have played on in my box lacrosse career, and this includes winter and summer. So we have, obviously my hometown Brampton Excelsiors on there. We have the Coquitlam Adanacs, who I played 3 seasons with. The Victoria Shamrocks are on here, who I played in 2003 with. I played some Senior B with the Ajax Pickering Rock. That's the AP Rock right here, and obviously the Toronto Rock. The Buffalo Bandits are on here. So these are all my box lacrosse teams on there. And then she knows that I, have a real affinity towards the game and the Indigenous roots. And she added all these pieces of Indigenous culture to it. And she asked permission to do it from Indigenous elders. Anyways, I have my own pouch and tobacco pouch and the drum and the eagle feathers and feathers that are on here as well. And it just became a special piece to me, and it just brought me to tears when I received it. It's just unbelievable the amount of effort that some people go
a life
go
in the
to,
game
right?
in one object.
In one object, yeah. So this is it for me.
That's absolutely stunning.
Yeah, no,
and
it is.
beautiful.
Yeah. And I have her to thank for that. Yeah.
That's great. When did you become a teacher? Like, you have your lacrosse career, but then you've got to earn money for your family as well, career. Beyond what you earn in the pro league. But, so how did that all happen?
Wasn't a great high school student. I was one of these guys that trying to just get by, take all the easy subjects, get 50s and 60s, usually 80 and 90 in phys ed, and I'm good. And then in grade 12, my phys ed teacher, I did a little presentation on the sport of bowling. We had to do this presentation on
what school was that?
Unique. It was at Toronto District Christian High School in Woodbridge.
Okay.
And this particular phys ed teacher, at the end of my presentation, she wrote, we had to do a written piece as well, and at the end of my written piece, she said, you should consider being a teacher, a phys ed teacher. And I'm thinking I'm just going to work after high school, and that just, all of a sudden, the light bulb went off, like, wait a minute, yeah, that's right, because my phys ed teachers, who I adored at this high school, they were making money actually teaching people sports, and I love sports. And so it just all of a sudden made sense that I could do this. And I could be a good student if I tried, but I never tried. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I started trying. I had to go back for grade 13 back then because I didn't have the marks in the grade 13 to get into university, which you need to become a teacher. So all of a sudden I started trying, and then I became a teacher in 1992. I got my teacher certificate in 1991, and I started my teaching career in also a Christian high school in Bowmanville for 3 years. It was a small high school, so I was the phys ed department. I ran the phys ed, all the coaches, all the coaching, I should say, all the sport teams. I ran all the phys ed in the school. I was the guy.
Yeah.
So it taught me a lot. And then we did Africa after that. That took a couple of teaching years out for me.
What did you do in Africa? Real quickly, what were you doing over there? Were you teaching lacrosse?
No. So that was just a total teaching stint.
A teaching
my
stint.
wife and I,
Okay.
she's an elementary school teacher, and the two of us were asked to go out there and volunteer with an organization that taught teachers different methodologies. Back over there, they do lecture style,
Okay.
almost like university, to kids. So we were brought over there to bring in some more cooperative learning type of techniques and stations, and introduce some equipment like science equipment into the classroom, and English books and
Wow.
math equipment,
Wow.
and where they're actually working with protractors and those kinds of things. So that's what we did out there. So we didn't teach students, we taught teachers how to teach students in a different way. That's what we were brought out there to do. And then we came back. I got on with the Toronto District School Board, and I was a teacher at Agincourt for 21 years.
Yeah.
Ran lacrosse, obviously lacrosse team there. Was a convener of the TDSB lacrosse as well for 12 years, as a convener of all the TDSB. And I taught phys ed there and math. And then the last 5 years I've been at the Native Learning Education Center. So it's kind of full circle how this sport kind of brought me to this center that teaches high school, Indigenous high school kids at the TDSB. It's part of the TDSB as well. So I'm a teacher there, and I teach science and phys ed and math there, and to students that are struggling. I mean, they have their issues, but they come to a nice, safe place at school, and they can get a meal there, they can get education there, and that's where I've been for the last 5 years, and I'm retiring at the end of this year, I'm happy to say.
So you how many times you played 2 years for Team Canada in the World Indoor Lacrosse? Two different times,
I
you mean?
I played once in 2003 when it first started. They adopted the World Indoor Lacrosse Championships. It was played actually around this area. It was Oshawa, Hamilton. I think Brampton had a game. I can't remember all the arenas.
Mississauga, and then Kitchener-Waterloo had it as well. Yeah.
Okay. So then they put this amazing team together. That at that time I was 38 years old, I believe, or 37 years old. So near the end of my lacrosse career, and they asked if I wanted to be captain, and Les Bartley again was coach, and Ed Como assistant.
What year was that?
It was 2003.
Oh, that year. Okay.
Back then, so I played in that team.
Okay.
And then in 2007, actually at that 2003 event, because they hosted it every 4 years. In 4 years, I'm going to be 41 years old, and at that event, actually, the Czech coach came up to me who could speak English.
Yep.
His name was Pavel Samarak, and he said, in the Czech Republic, we play box lacrosse, and he said, what would it take for you to coach us in 2007? I said, well, if I'm not playing, I'd consider it. And he remembered that, and in 2006, he contacted me and said, would you be interested in coaching if you're not playing? And I said, I don't think I'm playing. I said, I would be interested in helping you guys learn more about the game. And I was, I guess, at that time, 41 years old. So I wasn't going to be very useful to Team Canada, I don't think so. I decided to coach the Czech Republic in Halifax, actually, was then. And then I was helping them again in 2011. This one was in Prague. So I was helping the Czech National Team at that time, assistant coach again. And we made it to fourth. We won fourth place in Prague, which was big deal for that country. Enjoyed my time with that program. And then in 2015 was my final year with the Czech National Team. I became the head coach. And it was at Onondaga near Syracuse there. And to play in that venue on that nation was really super special, not just for me, but the Czech players. And they could really feel the indigenous spirit and medicine part of the game as well. So that was pretty special.
So as a player, did you play for Canada in 2 of them, or just one?
Well, the 1998 was a field lacrosse
Okay.
where I played, and the other one was a 85. I was a junior age player, and they were sending a team to the States to play U.S. and Australia. They did a 3-team kind of, they called it a world tournament.
Yeah.
But it was only the 3 nations that were playing box lacrosse at the time. So we had, it wasn't even an exhibition game. It was like you played one home game against the U.S. in the U.S. and one home game on Canada soil. We ended up winning that game that we needed to win in the U.S. in Philadelphia at that time, which I didn't know was such a ruckus crowd at the time. They were, when my name was announced and they were at the end of my name, they would say sucks, and just 15, 16,000 people shouting sucks to your name was my first experience. I think I was 19 years old at the time, kind of like, what have I entered here? What kind of octagon have I entered here? But we ended up winning that game, and that was a pretty special moment. So I count that as a world experience, but the 2003 was more countries involved.
Yeah, and in 2003, you put on the Canadian sweater. That must have been something for you to represent your country.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, anytime you do that, it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, so in 16 years of NLL play, you had 8 titles, which is pretty amazing. It's hard to win a title.
Yeah.
And what do you think you brought to these teams? Don't be shy about it. Like, what do you think you did? Everybody brings something to a winning team.
Right. Yeah. No, I've always said that. Like I said earlier, like a team to win a championship is so special because you need everybody to do it. Like right down to the water boy. Like it really takes everybody. And that's what, again, I give a lot of credit to Les, because he built that. He had the right assistant coaches. He had the right leadership, like myself included. Like I was captain, and Pat Coyle and Glenn Clark assistants, and Terry Bullen, and like just the right people who could say the right things at the right time, or who could show the way by the way you were on the floor. And I was kind of that guy. I was the guy that, at the end of the game, I was bloody, I was scraped, I was beat up. I was, like I said, I wasn't a big guy, but I put myself in harm's way, to grab a loose ball or to get an assist or a goal or whatever. And I think that's what people appreciated about me the most. If I think about it,
Effort.
It was the effort, right? And trying to show people what it took to win a championship, because everybody's got skill. Like I always say that even today. Like, it's not hard to find skilled guys. It's like, what do you do with it? And do you have the right amount of it? Not too much, not too little. And I think that's what was good about those teams. I think the Buffalo championships were pure skill. Like, we could win a game in 10 minutes. Even though the game's 60 minutes, we had enough offensive power with the Kilgores and Tavares and Cordingley and Hamley and Keenan and Kevin Alexander, and like, these guys were pure goal scorers. We could win games in 10 minutes and take the rest of the night off, or win them at the end, or where the Rock was, like I said, different. We didn't have those superstar scorers, so we had to do it differently, and Les understood that. Our coaches understood that. Each player understood that. I understood it. So I think it's a lot about buy-in and what are you willing to do that you're good at. And don't try to, be the big goal scorer if you're not. Like, you can contribute in multiple ways. Like, you could be the leader of our warm-up, right? Or the stretch guy, or we still need you. We need you to be that next up guy if somebody gets injured. And are you ready? And like, we talked a lot about that. We didn't just assume it, we talked about it. And I think that's what made the difference.
With 3 Legends banners now hanging here in Rock City, now it's time to chase another banner of the championship variety and continue the legacy.
I got a call from Jamie Dowick, the owner, and
What year was that, roughly?
I believe it was 2000. I'm going to say 17.
Okay.
I might be wrong on
COVID
the
throws
actual year.
everything off.
Yeah. But anyways, it was April. I remember when they had a game. you know, at the Scotiabank Center.
Yeah.
I think it was called Air Canada Center at the time, and you know, he said, we'd like to retire your jersey up into the rafters with, you know, some names that Colin Doyle and Bob Watson and, you know, Les Bartley, obviously, you know how much he means to me, and Terry Sanderson, two of my coaches during my career in Toronto. So it was a great honor, obviously, and I said, yeah, that would be great, and I know what those events are like, and just to have my dad, like he's still alive, to be able to get that moment with me and be on the turf with me, with my mom and my own wife and kids, and was a memory I'll never forget. And to be able one last time to thank the people that helped me get to where I was, and not only just my coworkers who did extra time at work just so I could get away to play lacrosse, and you know, my family and my wife, how many weekends she sacrificed taking care of my kids while I was out doing my thing, playing lacrosse, and you know, and my own parents, and just those moments you start to reflect on and realize who was all involved, and be able to thank the fans, and you know, of what they meant to me, and how much they meant to me as well. It's just a really special moment to bring it all together and just to reflect, because sometimes you forget, or sometimes you just go on with life. So it's kind of cool to have these kind of moments to do that. And it was neat because the other day it was at actually it's Hamilton First Ontario Center, and my daughter's boyfriend, he came with us to one of the games there, and kind of looks in the rafter and he says, "Hey, wait a minute, that's your number." "Is that you?" He said. I said, "Yeah, that's me." So it was kind of cool. You know, those kind of moments now I can have forever.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Rock City. Go, Rock, go. One more time for Jim Scoop Veltman.
Kind of gets me to the point where there's so much happening with this game right now.
Yeah.
You know, first time in the Olympics in 120 years.
Right.
Coming up in 2028 in Los Angeles. What do you think about all this? You know, and like I remember playing for Canada in '78, and we had 4 countries would come to the World Championships. Now there's over 100 countries playing the game.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just a really. It can be the golden age for the game now, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's exponential, it's explosive. You know, I think it's opportunities that kids have now, they can see it. I didn't really have that as a kid. Like, you know, senior A was about as high as I saw my future going. But, you know, with the professional piece, there's just so much that kids have to look forward to, and getting scholarships in the States and even, you know, in Canada and places like that. And these kind of facilities that are lacrosse first facilities, it's just unreal that this is actually happening in my lifetime, and it's just so cool to see. And like you said, I know it's a different version of sixes, but it's still a version, right? And I think the piece that really is important for me is that we maintain those Indigenous roots. And I think everybody's trying to do that as much as possible, and to understand that this game comes and means something to all of us, and a little bit more to an Indigenous person, and just respecting the game, and that's where I hope it doesn't get lost in this explosiveness. And it is exciting, and that is great, and the amount of countries that are involved is really exciting. And I think the piece about bringing that history is so important to maintain, because this game is true medicine. It is a spiritual game. It's meant to be that way. You know, for the creator. And as long as we have that mentality, I think then the room for growth is even more than just that.
There'll probably be some news within a year or so about Haudenosaunee being the first Indigenous representative in the IOC, you know, IOC playing in this game, you know. So how do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, I work with those people every day right now, so I know it, you know, how much sovereignty and self-governance means to them. And what a way to sort of push forward some of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Like it's a great document, but what are we doing with it? Like where's the movement? Where's the action piece? And I think that's where a lot of Indigenous people become disheartened and say, yeah, it's a great document, but you know, we're still here. We're not recognized as our own country in some of these places where it should be recognized, especially in lacrosse. I mean, this is, you know, just a great way to show that where the game came from and who presented it to us and the gift that they gave us. I think it would just be a great show of support to the Haudenosaunee people. And I think they would, I don't know, I mean, they're a very good team as we've recognized in some of the international events that didn't matter whether they had the right passport or not. But yeah, I think it's really important that they're there and they're represented, and I'm hoping, you know, fingers crossed that this is actually going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. So, Jim, we're kind of nearing the end of the interview. Anything you want, you know, this is your time to, if I've missed the point or something, talk about an area that you'd like to talk about, or you know, just.
Well, you're a good interviewer, so you touched on a lot of things. So there's not a lot, you know, again, I always wanted to go back to the game itself and the Indigenous people that gave this to us. And I'm just so grateful as a person, like how it's changed me and what kind of opportunities it's brought to me in my life is just so special. And I just want to acknowledge that and make sure, and maybe, and I'm hoping just because of your questions, I'm hoping it comes through in some of my answers that I'm truly grateful to the Indigenous people. And, you know, I've been touched by this game and in ways that I can't imagine. My family's been touched, my friends, just so much I have to give to the people that brought me this game. And, you know, and I'm just a lucky kid who was born in the right place at the right time in a small town in Brampton at the time, whose kids played lacrosse in the summer. And Dutch immigrant parents, why would my parents put me in lacrosse? So someone, the creator, someone was looking after me to make sure I was in the right place at the right time so that I could have this experience and opportunity.
Great. Well, thank you, Jim, for your time, and great story, and it'll be shared with the lacrosse community.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
Right.
Thanks.
Great.